The courtroom was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. In the front row, a small group of reporters shifted in their seats, adjusting their cameras, ready to capture whatever came next. At the center of it all, sitting calmly in a dark gray suit, was none other than Elon Musk, a man who had reshaped the world with his tech companies, whose name was synonymous with space exploration, electric cars, and ambitious dreams of colonizing Mars. But today, he wasn't here to unveil another groundbreaking innovation. No, today, he sat in the hot seat, facing an unexpected lawsuit that would change everything. Judge Samantha Taylor stepped into the courtroom, and the atmosphere instantly shifted. Tall, sharp-eyed, and dressed in the formal robes that signified her authority, Judge Taylor wasn't your typical judge. She wasn't here to play games. A reputation had followed her into this trial, the tough-as-nails, no-nonsense leader who'd earned her stripes through years of fiercely protecting justice, even when that meant challenging the most powerful in the room. Today, her eyes were locked on Musk, and a sharp, knowing look passed between them. "Mr. Musk, I trust you're aware of the seriousness of this matter." Judge Taylor's voice broke the silence, cutting through the room with an icy precision. Elon's calm demeanor faltered for just a split second. He cleared his throat, his fingers briefly brushing over the edge of the table in front of him, as if grounding himself before responding. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, but there was a hint of something in his eyes, something that was hard to pinpoint. Was it concern? Or just the weight of being in an unfamiliar place? The room was buzzing with curiosity, and everyone's eyes were trained on the two of them. Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur, the innovator who'd soared to unimaginable heights, and Judge Taylor, the formidable figure who had earned her place as one of the most respected and feared judges in the country. The lawsuit wasn't your average corporate case. It wasn't about patents or financial settlements. It was about something much more personal. A former employee of Musk's company had filed a lawsuit, claiming that the tech giant's business practices were not just unethical but outright damaging to the workers who helped build his empire. It wasn't just a legal matter, it was a battle of ideals. Was Musk the visionary genius that the world hailed him as? Or was he a ruthless mogul who, in his pursuit of greatness, had left destruction in his wake? The legal team representing Musk stood by him, poised and ready to fight. Yet, no matter how many lawyers he had on his side, none could take the pressure off him now. The courtroom knew that no amount of fame or fortune could protect him from the glaring spotlight of this trial. The world was watching, and Judge Taylor was determined to see it through, no special treatment, no exceptions. She was about to put Musk on trial in ways he'd never experienced. "You know, Mr. Musk," she continued, her voice sharp as she addressed him directly, "your companies have changed the world. No one can deny that. But now, we find ourselves here, asking whether your success came at a cost that you're not willing to face." A slight tension rose in the room as Musk shifted in his seat. He had always been able to manage the media, to handle public relations and controversies with ease. But this? This was different. This wasn't about a tweet or a product launch gone wrong. This was a legal battle that threatened to strip away the very image he had worked so hard to build. "Your Honor, Musk began, but Judge Taylor raised a hand, silencing him instantly. The courtroom fell even quieter. "Mr. Musk, I don't need to hear your rehearsed speeches. I need to hear the truth." Her voice was sharp, unwavering, as if every word was laced with authority. "I need to understand who you really are, not the image, not the brand, but the man behind it all." For a brief moment, Elon Musk sat frozen, caught off guard by her bluntness. In all his years of navigating high-stakes situations, he had never encountered anyone quite like Judge Taylor. Her directness was like a jolt of electricity. Musk had always been the one who controlled the narrative, who shaped how people saw him. But here, in this courtroom, he wasn't in control. The tension in the room was palpable. Musk's mind raced, his eyes narrowing as he considered his next move. He wasn't used to being in the hot seat like this. He had built his empire by thinking 5, 10, 20 steps ahead, by solving complex problems that others couldn't even comprehend. But Judge Taylor wasn't interested in his usual game plan. She wanted something real. The silence was broken by the sound of the gavel. "I think it's time we dig deeper, Mr. Musk," Judge Taylor said, her eyes never leaving his. "Let's begin by understanding the full scope of what brought you here today." Musk took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had been in countless boardrooms, negotiating with the best and brightest in business. But this? This was something entirely different. And it was clear that Judge Taylor wasn't going to give him any easy outs. The cameras clicked away as reporters began scribbling notes. It was only the beginning of a journey that would expose Musk's private world to public scrutiny in a way no one had ever seen before. What would happen if someone like Elon Musk, who seemed untouchable, was forced to confront his own flaws and mistakes? The question lingered in the air as the courtroom waited for the first real answers. "Mr. Musk," Judge Taylor continued, "you stand here today, not as a tech mogul or a billionaire, but as someone who will have to answer for their actions. And that, Mr. Musk, is what we will explore over the course of this trial." A ripple of murmurs ran through the courtroom, the world beyond it bracing for what was to come. The very foundation of Musk's empire was about to be tested in ways he never anticipated. And this was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom had been buzzing with tension for days, but today, it seemed as if the air itself had thickened. Musk sat, his gaze fixed ahead, but his mind was elsewhere. For a man who had built rockets that could return to Earth after launching into space, who had revolutionized the electric car industry and made plans for Mars colonization, the events unfolding in front of him seemed like a completely different universe. He wasn't the visionary leader today, he was the defendant. And as Judge Samantha Taylor prepared to delve deeper into the trial, Musk found his thoughts drifting back, far from the present moment. Elon Musk was born in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971. His early life was nothing like the polished, confident billionaire everyone saw today. Raised by a brilliant and demanding father, Elon Musk, Elon often felt overshadowed by his father's intimidating intelligence and high expectations. Elon Musk was a man of high intellect and low empathy, traits that would shape much of Elon's perception of success and self-worth. His father didn't show affection or praise for his son's achievements. Instead, Elon was often met with criticism, a demanding environment that stoked the fire of his relentless drive, but also left deep emotional scars. Elon's mother, May Musk, was a Canadian-born dietitian and model, who, in contrast to Errol, was a constant source of love and support. May, a woman of remarkable strength and grace, raised Elon and his siblings on her own after her marriage to Errol ended. Despite her own struggles, May was the steady hand that guided Elon through many of his childhood challenges. She would always remind him that nothing was impossible if he set his mind to it. But despite his mother's nurturing care, the tension between his parents affected Elon deeply. His father's harsh words and distant nature drove him into his own world, a world of books, video games, and a growing obsession with technology. He found solace in the pages of science fiction novels, in stories that allowed him to dream of possibilities beyond his mundane surroundings. It was in these books that Elon first encountered the idea of space travel, and the seeds of what would become SpaceX were planted. When he was 12 years old, Musk had a breakthrough that would change the course of his life. He taught himself computer programming and created a video game called Blaster. He sold it for $500, a meager sum in the grand scheme of things, but to Elon, it was a sign. This was the first time he truly realized that he could create something out of nothing, something that could be valued by others. It was the spark that ignited his passion for innovation. As Musk moved to Canada to attend Queen's University, and later to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, he became more focused on his vision. His time at school was marked by a growing dissatisfaction with the traditional educational system. He felt it didn't foster the kind of creativity or risk-taking he believed was necessary to change the world. Instead of following the prescribed path, Musk left school early to pursue his own dreams. He dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford after just 2 days, deciding that the real world offered more immediate opportunities than academic theory. From there, the roller coaster ride of his entrepreneurial career began. He co-founded Zip2, an online software company, which was later sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million. He then went on to create X.com, which would eventually become PayPal and be sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. Each of these ventures seemed to put Musk in the public spotlight more and more, and with each success, his ambition grew. But even then, there were moments when Musk would return to his childhood doubts, moments where the scars from his father's rejection would rear their ugly heads. He was no longer that timid, unsure boy, but his desire to prove himself was rooted in something deeper, something that few understood. As the courtroom proceedings continued, Musk's mind slipped back to another key moment in his life, the creation of SpaceX. The idea of making life multiplanetary was not just a business opportunity for Musk. It was deeply personal. It was about transcending the limitations of Earth, and by extension, the limitations he had felt his entire life. His father had always mocked his ambitions, belittling his dreams of space travel and telling him it was a waste of time. So, for Elon, SpaceX became more than a company, it became a way to prove to his father, and to himself, that he could achieve the impossible. But here, in this courtroom, in front of Judge Taylor, none of that mattered. The grand achievements, the billions of dollars, the groundbreaking ideas, it all seemed irrelevant. What mattered now was something far simpler, accountability. Musk had spent his career pushing the boundaries of what was possible, but now, the world was pushing him to confront the very consequences of his actions. Judge Taylor's voice broke the silence in the courtroom again, pulling Musk from his thoughts. Mr. Musk, as you stand before this court, you are not just facing accusations from an ex-employee. You are facing the collective scrutiny of a world that has watched you rise and fall, create and destroy. You've built your empire with the ambition of a man who believes he is untouchable. But today, you will answer for your choices. You will answer for the lives of those who were part of that empire. Musk's chest tightened. He had been here before, navigating the tough waters of criticism, but never like this. Not in the same way. This wasn't about a product launch gone wrong, or a controversial tweet. This was about people. Real people. People whose lives had been impacted by the choices he made from his high tower of power. As Judge Taylor's eyes fixed on him, Musk felt a flicker of doubt for the first time in a long while. The truth, he realized, was that no matter how far you went, how many billions you amassed, there would always be someone left behind. And now, those people were looking to him for answers. The courtroom had become a battlefield, and Judge Samantha Taylor was the commander leading the charge. Each question she posed to Musk felt like an incision into his carefully constructed empire. The stakes had never been so high. The media's gaze was sharp, and Musk was no longer the beloved tech mogul who could do no wrong. Today, he was just another man who had to answer for his choices, choices that had affected lives in ways he never imagined. As the trial progressed, the details of the lawsuit began to take shape. The plaintiff, a former employee of one of Musk's many ventures, had claimed that the corporate culture within Musk's companies was toxic and exploitative. She spoke of long hours, intense pressure, and a lack of empathy toward workers who had poured their hearts and souls into projects that, in some cases, had changed the world. The accusations were hard to ignore. Her testimony was detailed and gripping. She described the mental toll that working in such an environment took on her and her colleagues. The employee's attorney painted a picture of a company obsessed with profits, with little regard for the well-being of the people who made those profits possible. And that wasn't the worst of it. There were claims of wrongful termination and mistreatment, allegations that would cause any reasonable person to stop and question the ethical underpinnings of the company Musk had built. At first, Musk had remained silent. He sat in his chair, his face a mask of determination, though it was becoming increasingly harder to maintain his composure. He was used to fighting back against critics. He had done so countless times over the years, whether it was challenging government regulators or defending his companies in the face of public backlash. But this time, it was different. This was not some Twitter spat or public debate. This was a legal battle that had the potential to unravel everything he had worked for. Judge Taylor's eyes never wavered as she continued her questioning. "Mr. Musk, you've heard the testimony of Ms. Richards. You've heard her claims, the pain she and others endured while working at your companies. What do you say to that?" Musk felt the weight of the room pressing down on him. The courtroom had gone quiet, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. He could feel the eyes of every person in that room on him, from the reporters to the spectators to the very judge who seemed to see through him. He took a slow breath, leaning forward, but still trying to maintain his usual calm and collected demeanor. "I believe we've always tried to do our best to create a positive environment," he said, his voice steady but strained. "Our companies are driven by the idea of innovation, and that requires hard work and dedication. But I understand that not everyone's experience is the same, and I deeply regret any harm that may have been caused. That was never the intention." Judge Taylor didn't look convinced. "Mr. Musk, with all due respect, your intention doesn't change the reality of what people experience. Your companies are run like high-performance machines, and not everyone is built to function in that kind of environment. You're asking the court to believe that these issues are isolated incidents. But there's evidence to the contrary. Multiple people have come forward, and their stories align in troubling ways." Musk clenched his jaw. He had heard enough of this kind of rhetoric before. It was the same criticism he had faced when he first launched Tesla, when he was dismissed as a madman chasing impossible dreams. But this time, the words were hitting closer to home. This wasn't about space exploration or electric cars. This was about the lives of real people, people who had trusted him, worked for him, and yet felt betrayed by the very companies he had built. The room fell into silence again as Judge Taylor prepared to continue. Musk's legal team seemed ready to jump in, but Taylor had made it clear she wasn't interested in their defense just yet. She wanted Musk's truth. And for the first time in a long while, Musk felt unsure if he could offer that. "Mr. Musk," Judge Taylor's voice broke through his thoughts again. "I think it's clear that you have a lot of power, a lot of influence. But let me ask you this, how do you plan to use that power moving forward? Will you continue to prioritize your vision and profits, or will you start to take responsibility for the human cost of that ambition?" Her question hung in the air, and for a moment, Musk didn't know how to respond. It wasn't a question he had ever really considered in such stark terms. He had always believed that innovation would solve everything, that by pushing the boundaries of what was possible, he could bring about the change the world needed. But Judge Taylor was forcing him to see the consequences of his actions from a different angle. As he sat there, his mind raced through all the moments that had led him here. The long nights, the pressure to innovate, the battles with critics who didn't understand his vision. And then there were the people, the ones who had helped him get to the top, the ones who were now coming forward with accusations that seemed too numerous to ignore. Could he have done things differently? Could he have built his empire without sacrificing the well-being of the very people who made it possible? His thoughts were interrupted when the plaintiff's attorney stood to deliver their closing statement. The tone had shifted. The courtroom now felt like a pressure cooker, every word adding to the heat. The attorney didn't hold back. They hammered home the notion that Musk's companies were built on the backs of employees who were taken advantage of. The accusations grew louder and more intense, painting a picture of a man willing to sacrifice everything, including the lives of those who worked for him, in the pursuit of success. Musk's team shifted uncomfortably. His lawyers were already drafting counterarguments, preparing to defend their client at all costs. But it didn't feel like just another legal battle anymore. This felt personal. And the more Musk listened, the more he realized that this wasn't about a single lawsuit, this was about a reckoning. A reckoning that he had been avoiding for years. And as Judge Taylor looked down at the defense and the plaintiff side, there was no mistaking it, this trial wasn't just about Musk's reputation anymore. It was about the future. His future. And if he didn't start answering the tough questions, he might find that his empire would collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The days leading up to the next phase of the trial were a blur for Elon Musk. Every moment he spent outside the courtroom, he couldn't shake the feeling of a world closing in on him. His usual confidence, that trademark belief that no problem was too big, no challenge too insurmountable, seemed to waver. As his legal team scrambled to strategize, Musk found himself retreating inward. The pressure of defending his company's reputation, his legacy, his vision, felt more intense than any rocket launch or technological breakthrough he had ever faced. It was in the quiet of the night that Musk found himself reflecting on the bigger picture. The thought gnawed at him, was this the culmination of everything he had built, or the unraveling of it? The world had watched him soar to unimaginable heights, but now, for the first time, he was on the brink of falling. Judge Taylor, ever the unyielding presence in the courtroom, had made it clear that the court wasn't merely interested in Musk's defense of his actions. The deeper question was why the issues had spiraled to this point. Why, after all the success, had it taken a lawsuit to open his eyes to the internal decay within his companies? And most importantly, was Elon Musk ready to face the truth, not just the legal truth, but the moral truth? That night, as he sat in his office at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, he felt the weight of a question lingering over him like a dark cloud: what would it take to change the very culture of the empire I built? His mind wandered to the early days of SpaceX. When he had first envisioned his company, it wasn't just a tech startup. SpaceX was meant to change the world. It was his way of reaching beyond Earth, a literal escape from the limitations of the world he knew, and from the failures he had carried with him for years. But somewhere along the way, the mission had blurred. The passion for space had been replaced with an obsession for speed, for success at any cost. The grand dreams had given way to the grind of day-to-day operations. The promises made to investors, the timelines for product launches, the demands of shareholders, they had all become so consuming that the culture within the company had morphed into something unrecognizable. He had become the very thing he had always feared, a person who lost sight of the human aspect in pursuit of the bigger picture. He hadn't meant for it to happen, but now, as he sat in the stillness of the night, he realized how far he had drifted from his original mission. As dawn approached, Musk finally left the office. The trial was set to resume the next day, and it would be a pivotal moment. He needed to face his past, not just the past few months leading to the lawsuit, but the years that had defined his approach to leadership. He had to confront the truths about himself and his empire, even if it meant acknowledging that the way he had built everything wasn't as flawless as he had once believed. The next morning, as he entered the courtroom, the tension was palpable. It was as if the very air around him was holding its breath. Judge Taylor sat at the bench, her sharp eyes following his every move. The plaintiff's team was ready to present more evidence. This time, the stories of several other former employees would be shared. These testimonies were expected to add weight to the accusations, creating an even stronger case against Musk's leadership. His legal team had prepared counterarguments, but none of them seemed sufficient to him anymore. Musk realized he had reached a point where no amount of legal defense or financial muscle would win him this battle. This wasn't about winning in the traditional sense. This wasn't a war of courtroom tactics. This was a moral reckoning. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure what the right answer was. As the plaintiff's attorney began outlining the next set of testimonies, Musk's mind wandered. The stories they told were raw and emotional. Former employees described long nights at Tesla and SpaceX, where burnout was common, and personal lives were sacrificed for the sake of progress. They spoke of constant pressure to perform, of being pushed beyond their limits without sufficient regard for their health or happiness. There were stories of employees who had been let go without warning, many of whom were blindsided by their terminations after dedicating years to the company. The attorney's words painted a picture of an environment driven by fear and unrelenting demand for perfection. Elon's fingers tightened around the arms of his chair. He could feel his chest constricting as the reality of the situation became clearer with each word. His empire, his grand vision, was being dismantled before him. But the worst part was that, deep down, he knew there was truth in these stories. He had been too focused on reaching the stars to notice the cracks forming beneath his feet. "Mr. Musk," Judge Taylor's voice broke through his thoughts, "what do you say to the testimonies we've heard so far? Are these isolated incidents, or is there a deeper issue at play?" The question hung in the air like an axe waiting to fall. Musk felt the eyes of the courtroom on him, the eyes of the media, the eyes of the employees who had suffered, the eyes of the world who had once idolized him. For a moment, all of his usual bravado disappeared, and he was just a man, standing in front of a judge, a man who had to answer for the choices he made. He stood up slowly, his legs feeling heavy as though the weight of the world was pressing down on him. I've always believed in what we're doing," he said, his voice uncharacteristically faltering. "I've always pushed for innovation, for the future. But I see now that in my pursuit of something greater, I've lost sight of the people who helped build all of this. And for that, I am deeply sorry." The courtroom went silent. It was a rare moment. The great Elon Musk, the man who had once been untouchable, was now openly acknowledging his faults. Judge Taylor's gaze softened, just for a second. She wasn't looking for an apology, but this admission, this vulnerability, spoke volumes. The battle wasn't over. It wouldn't be resolved in a single moment. But in that instant, Elon Musk had taken the first step towards something bigger than any trial, something that would shape not just the rest of the courtroom proceedings, but his future. The following days were a whirlwind for Elon Musk. What had started as a routine legal battle quickly spiraled into something far bigger than he had ever anticipated. Every word, every movement in the courtroom, seemed to echo in his mind long after the trial sessions ended. It wasn't just the future of Tesla or SpaceX at stake anymore, it was his entire sense of identity, his legacy, and the moral foundation on which he had built his empire. After his emotional confession in court, the media storm exploded. Headlines declared that Elon Musk was finally facing accountability. Some applauded him for his vulnerability, for stepping up and admitting his mistakes. Others, however, saw it as a sign of weakness, a desperate move to salvage what little remained of his reputation. But the most unexpected reaction came from the employees, the very people who had worked for him, sacrificed their time and well-being for his companies. The mixed responses from his former staff filled him with a deep sense of dread. Some saw his apology as genuine, a sign that he was finally ready to make real change. Others, though, felt betrayed all over again, their anger reigniting as they realized how little had changed in the corporate culture. Musk spent sleepless nights reading the messages from former employees who had come forward. Some thanked him for acknowledging the issue, while others questioned his sincerity. Each message cut deep. How had he allowed things to go so far? Had he been so blinded by ambition that he had forgotten the very people who made his success possible? It wasn't just the media or the employees that were weighing on Musk's mind, though. His team had been working tirelessly to prepare their next strategy, but every legal argument felt like a temporary solution. The deeper issue lay within himself, the personal reckoning that was unfolding in real time. Musk had always been a man driven by the belief that he was changing the world, but now he was grappling with the realization that his vision had come at a cost. The trial entered its next phase, and the courtroom was once again packed. The energy was different now, the air was thick with anticipation, but there was also a sense of quiet. Even Judge Taylor's expression seemed more measured, her eyes focused on Musk, as though she were waiting for him to show something more than just remorse. She had seen the vulnerability, but she needed to see action. She wasn't the type to let someone off the hook with just words. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice firm, cutting through the quiet hum of the room. "You've acknowledged your mistakes. You've admitted that your company's culture needs change. But the question remains, what are you going to do about it? How do you plan to right these wrongs?" It was the most critical question yet. Musk had been avoiding it in his mind, trying to focus on the immediate defense, the legal strategy that would pull him out of this mess. But here, in the harsh light of reality, he couldn't hide from the truth any longer. He had to answer, and he had to answer with more than just an apology. He stood up slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The room seemed to fade away as he stared directly at Judge Taylor. It was as if the weight of his entire career had been condensed into this one moment. This was no longer a fight against legal accusations or bad press. This was a battle for his soul, for the kind of man he was, the kind of leader he wanted to be. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Judge," Musk began, his voice steady but tinged with a new resolve. "I've spent years pushing for progress, for breakthroughs that could change the world. But in doing so, I've overlooked the people who helped make those breakthroughs possible. The truth is, I didn't build this empire alone. I had help. And I failed to recognize that." He paused, taking a breath, allowing the gravity of his words to settle in the room. "But that changes now," Musk continued, his tone firm. "I can't change the past, but I can control the future. I'm committing today to changing the culture within my companies. We are going to prioritize the well-being of our employees. We're going to create an environment where innovation and compassion can coexist. I will lead by example, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of leadership. I want to make sure that no one else has to feel the way these people have felt." The room fell silent again. Judge Taylor's expression softened slightly, but she wasn't about to let him off easily. "Words are important, Mr. Musk, but actions speak louder. We'll need to see how you follow through on these promises. This trial is just the beginning. The road ahead will be long, and it's going to take more than just good intentions to repair the damage done." Musk nodded, fully aware of what she meant. The emotional climax of the trial wasn't just about a moment of truth. It was about the painful reality that the consequences of his actions wouldn't be resolved overnight. The road to redemption, if it existed at all, would require hard work, transparency, and most importantly, change from within. Musk wasn't naive enough to think this would be easy, but it was necessary. For the first time, he understood the true weight of leadership. It wasn't about pushing the limits of technology or being the richest person on earth. It was about lifting up the people around you, making sure they had a chance to thrive, not just survive. As the session ended, Musk returned to his seat, his mind still racing. He knew the journey was far from over, but something had shifted in him. He wasn't just fighting for his legacy anymore. He was fighting for something more meaningful, the chance to build a future that could be proud of. The weeks that followed the emotional turning point in the trial were some of the most difficult and transformative moments of Elon Musk's life. His promise to change the culture within his companies was no longer just a matter of public relations, it had become a personal mission. Every decision he made, every meeting he attended, was now filtered through the lens of what was best for the people who worked for him, not just the products they created. But the true challenge was not what was happening inside Tesla or SpaceX, it was the ongoing scrutiny from the media, the public, and, most importantly, from the employees who had been affected by years of burnout, broken promises, and a corporate culture driven by an obsession with success at all costs. Musk knew that repairing the damage would take time. The lawsuits weren't over, the trial wasn't over. But the words he spoke in that courtroom had ignited something, a spark of hope, both for him and for those who had suffered under his leadership. It began with small steps. Musk instituted mandatory mental health days for employees, something that seemed unheard of in his fast-paced, result-driven world. The leadership team began to embrace a new approach to work-life balance, making sure that the pressure to deliver did not come at the cost of human well-being. He initiated anonymous feedback channels for employees, a radical shift for someone who had previously been known for running a tight ship. People began to speak up, to be heard in ways they had never been before. But these changes, although crucial, were not enough to end the trial. While Musk had acknowledged his mistakes and taken steps to fix them, the repercussions of his past actions still had to be addressed in the courtroom. Judge Taylor had made it clear that the road to redemption wasn't going to be easy, that was just the beginning. It was a few months later when Musk returned to court, this time with more than just legal arguments. He had gathered a group of former employees who had been a part of the process of transformation. They weren't just legal witnesses or hired consultants, they were people whose lives had been changed by the steps Musk had taken since that pivotal moment in the trial. These were individuals who had once walked away from his companies, disillusioned and frustrated, but who had since returned, or chosen to stay, after witnessing the shift in culture. "We've seen a lot of change," one of the former engineers, a woman named Sarah, told the courtroom. "I've worked here for over 10 years, and I've never seen a shift like this before. It's not just words anymore. It's real change. Elon has shown that he's not just about space and technology, he's about people too." The jury listened intently as Sarah and others shared their stories. The room was heavy with emotion. Musk had taken a huge risk by allowing these employees to speak out publicly, but it was the only way he could show that his commitment to change was more than just a facade. As they spoke about the new initiatives, the personal time off, the leadership classes, and the opportunities to openly discuss the company culture, it became clear that Musk was doing more than fighting for his own freedom, he was fighting for something that, until recently, he hadn't fully understood, the heart of his companies. Judge Taylor nodded as the testimonies continued, her sharp eyes focused on the people in front of her. She was looking for sincerity, for real evidence that Musk had done more than just make empty promises. And, to her surprise, she found it. There was an undeniable sense of change that Musk had implemented. It was slow and steady, but it was undeniable. As the session came to a close, Judge Taylor addressed the court once more. "Mr. Musk, it's clear that you've made an effort to address the concerns raised throughout this trial. But let's be honest, real change doesn't happen overnight. The damage is still there, and while these testimonials are moving, they are just the beginning of a much larger process. However, I'm also seeing something I didn't expect, genuine remorse. And the willingness to act on it." Elon stood at the front of the room, listening to the judge's words. It was a moment of clarity for him. It wasn't about winning the case, or the battle, or even protecting his empire from the consequences of his past mistakes. It was about the process, about learning from his failures, about ensuring that he would never repeat them again. "You're right, Your Honor," Musk replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "The change won't happen overnight, and I won't pretend that it will. But I promise you, and I promise everyone who's been affected by my mistakes, that I will continue to work every day to make this right. Not just with legal remedies or financial settlements, but with real, meaningful changes. I've learned the hardest lesson of all, that leadership is not just about vision and ambition, it's about the people you lead." The judge nodded, her expression softening for the first time throughout the trial. "I believe you, Mr. Musk. And I hope for your sake, and for the sake of those around you, that this commitment is one you continue to honor." As the trial drew to a close, Musk's legal team filed their closing arguments. The case was still in play, and the legal battles would continue, but something had shifted that day. The impact of the trial, of his apology, of the real steps he had taken to address the culture at Tesla and SpaceX, they all left a mark, not just in the court of law, but in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed it. For the first time in years, Elon Musk allowed himself a deep breath. He knew the road ahead would still be difficult. But now, he had a new understanding of what it meant to truly lead. It was more than just the successes, the accolades, and the failures. It was about the people, the ones who stood by him, and the ones who had to leave because he had failed them. In the end, Elon Musk would not be defined by this trial or the headlines. He would be defined by how he chose to move forward, and how he would rebuild not just his companies, but his own understanding of leadership and accountability. After the trial ended, Elon Musk returned to the daily grind of running his businesses, but it wasn't the same. No matter how hard he tried to focus on the future, the weight of the trial and the revelations that came with it continued to hang over him like a dark cloud. Every decision he made was scrutinized, not only by his employees but by the public, the media, and even the people he had once considered allies. While Musk had committed to changing the culture at Tesla and SpaceX, he had underestimated how difficult it would be to win back the trust of everyone involved. Even the most loyal employees were skeptical. They had heard all the promises before. They had seen the lofty statements and the grand gestures, only to be disappointed when nothing changed. For some, Musk's transformation seemed like too little, too late. A few weeks after the trial, a major setback hit Tesla. A well-known journalist who had been closely following the trial released an exposé on the company, digging into its corporate culture and workplace conditions. The article was scathing, pointing out that despite Musk's promises, the systemic issues had not been entirely eradicated. The whistleblowers who had once been silenced were now speaking up, and the allegations were damning. It wasn't just about the demands of working long hours anymore, it was about the pervasive atmosphere of fear and aggression that still lingered at the highest levels of leadership. Employees recounted stories of harassment, micromanagement, and a relentless pursuit of profits at the expense of personal well-being. The backlash was swift and brutal. The stock price of Tesla took a significant dip, and online forums were flooded with former employees sharing their stories. For Musk, this was a blow he hadn't seen coming. No matter how much he had tried to change, it seemed like the past kept catching up with him. One evening, as Musk sat in his office at SpaceX, staring out the window at the stars, he received a call that would change the trajectory of the next phase of his life. It was a former employee, James, someone who had worked with him at Tesla during its early days. James had left the company years ago, disillusioned by the toxic environment Musk had allowed to flourish. But now, he was calling with a message that Musk could not ignore. Elon, James's voice was steady but full of emotion. I know we haven't spoken in a long time, but I've been following what's going on. I see the effort you're putting in, and I just wanted to tell you something important. Change is hard, and I know that better than anyone. But don't give up. You've got something special here, something worth fighting for. But you need to take this head on, fully. The culture isn't going to change with small gestures. You need to be in the trenches with your people. They need to know you're in this with them, not just as a leader, but as a fellow human being who understands their struggles. Musk had always considered himself a visionary, a leader who could see what others couldn't. But this conversation with James opened his eyes to something he had missed. He had been trying to fix the company without truly understanding the heart of the problem. It wasn't just about policies and top-down changes. It was about empathy. It was about walking beside his employees, sharing their burdens, and being open to their voices, not just as workers, but as human beings with hopes, dreams, and struggles of their own. The next morning, Musk made a decision. He would take a more hands-on approach to fixing the company culture, but this time, he would be doing it with a different mindset. He would engage with his employees directly, without the barriers of titles and power dynamics. He would work side by side with them, not as the billionaire CEO, but as someone who had learned the hard way that true leadership wasn't about giving orders from on high. It was about understanding the people you lead, showing them that their struggles mattered, and that their voices had real power. The first step was to visit the Tesla factory in Fremont, California. Musk had been to the factory countless times, but he had never truly taken the time to engage with the employees at the ground level. This time, however, he would do things differently. He arrived unannounced, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, and went straight to the production lines. The workers were surprised to see him there, but they weren't expecting a grand speech or a sales pitch. They just wanted to see if Musk was serious about change. At first, the interactions were awkward. Some workers were still bitter, unsure if they could trust Musk's sudden change in attitude. Others were cautiously optimistic, wondering if this was a real effort or just another attempt to save face. Musk spent hours walking the factory floor, talking to workers, asking them about their experiences, and listening to their frustrations. It was raw, uncomfortable, but necessary. For the first time in years, Musk felt like he was getting the full picture, not the polished version that he had been fed by his executives, but the truth of what was really happening inside his companies. One conversation stood out to him. A woman named Maria, a factory worker who had been with Tesla for 6 years, shared her story of working long hours with little recognition. "We want to believe in the mission," she said, "but sometimes it feels like we're just cogs in the machine. It's hard to stay motivated when you don't feel seen." Musk listened closely, and for the first time, he truly understood the weight of her words. It wasn't about making grand promises or offering incentives. It was about showing up, day after day, and making sure that every employee felt valued, not just as an asset, but as a person. After his visit, Musk made it clear to his leadership team that things had to change. They could no longer hide behind the facade of success. They would have to face the uncomfortable truths about their company culture head-on. The process of transformation would take time, but this was no longer just a matter of appeasing the media or meeting quotas. It was about rebuilding trust, one interaction at a time. And so, Musk's journey continued, not as a battle against the legal system, not as a fight for his reputation, but as a mission to rebuild the very foundation of his companies. There would be no easy solutions, no quick fixes. But for the first time, Musk felt like he was on the right path. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be real. The transformation Musk had started was more than just a response to the media backlash or the lessons from the trial. It had become a personal journey, one that was shaping him in ways he hadn't expected. The days of being an unapproachable CEO, dictating from behind a desk, were behind him. He had seen firsthand the flaws of his old leadership style, and now he was determined to repair the damage, even if it meant taking a step back from his usual role and facing uncomfortable truths. The changes Musk introduced in Tesla and SpaceX didn't happen in an instant. In fact, the first few weeks after his factory visit were a whirlwind of uncertainty and, at times, resistance. Some employees were skeptical of his newfound humility, wondering if it was just another phase, something that would eventually pass. Others, however, were cautiously optimistic, hopeful that Musk was genuinely willing to break the cycle and become the kind of leader they had always wished for. Musk spent more time at Tesla's production plants, rolling up his sleeves and working side by side with employees on the assembly lines. He didn't just make speeches, he genuinely engaged with them, asking how they felt, what they needed, and what changes would make their jobs more sustainable. Musk, known for his ambition and sometimes brutal drive for success, had to adjust to this new role, not just as a visionary, but as a listener. One afternoon, while working alongside a group of engineers, Musk stopped to listen to a woman named Emily, an experienced engineer who had been with Tesla for nearly 5 years. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, revealing a mixture of frustration and vulnerability that she had long kept hidden. "We're tired, Elon," Emily said, looking directly at him. "We know the stakes are high, but at what cost? We push ourselves past the breaking point every day, and it doesn't feel like anyone cares. You're always pushing for the next big thing, but sometimes I wonder if we're losing sight of what really matters." Musk had heard this sentiment from others, but this time it hit him harder. He had always been focused on achieving the next milestone, the next frontier of innovation. But in the process, he had lost sight of something vital, the well-being of the people who made those innovations possible. That evening, Musk called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. He could no longer ignore the reality that his approach had been flawed. "We need to do more than just deliver results," Musk told the team. "We need to make sure our people feel like they matter." We have to make space for them to grow, for them to thrive. No one should feel like they're just another cog in the machine. The leadership team was taken aback by Musk's words. They were used to hearing him talk about cutting-edge technology and ambitious goals, not about employee well-being. But there was no denying that Musk was serious. And over the following weeks, the changes began to take root. A major shift came in the form of leadership workshops. Musk brought in outside experts to work with his top managers and executives, focusing on emotional intelligence, empathy, and how to support their teams effectively. It wasn't just about soft skills, it was about giving leaders the tools they needed to foster a work environment where people felt supported, heard, and valued. Simultaneously, Musk launched a new initiative called Tesla for People, an internal platform where employees at all levels could submit ideas for improving workplace culture. The platform also allowed employees to voice concerns anonymously, a feature Musk hoped would help break down the communication barriers that had been so prevalent in the past. The idea was simple: give employees a voice, a chance to shape the future of the company, and to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And for the first time in years, employees at Tesla and SpaceX started to feel like their voices mattered. Musk's team began to trust him again, slowly but surely. They were seeing changes, tangible, real changes that weren't just about pushing the company to the next level of success, but about creating a sustainable and healthy work environment. Yet, not everything went smoothly. There were still lingering doubts among many employees. Some felt it was too little, too late, and couldn't forgive the past mistakes. Others were watching closely, waiting for Musk to falter, to go back to his old ways. Trust, after all, was not easily earned, especially after years of top-down management and unrelenting pressure. In the midst of these challenges, a crucial moment came when SpaceX successfully launched a new rocket, a project that had been in the works for years. The achievement was monumental, but it wasn't the only thing that made headlines that day. Musk decided to take a different approach to the celebration. Instead of giving a victory speech to the media and his top executives, he chose to address the entire company, all of the engineers, the support staff, the factory workers, via a live broadcast. He stood in front of the camera, the excitement of the successful launch still palpable in the air. But this time, his words were different. This time, he was speaking to everyone, not just the people at the top. "This victory doesn't belong to me or any single person," Musk said, his voice steady and genuine. "It belongs to every single person who's been a part of this. It's the result of your hard work, your sacrifices, your dedication. We've built something incredible here, but that's not just because of the technology. It's because of you. And we're going to keep pushing, together." The moment felt like a turning point, not just for Musk, but for everyone who had been part of the journey. For the first time in a long time, Musk had acknowledged the people who had been there all along, often in the shadows, making the impossible possible. In the weeks that followed, the internal atmosphere at Tesla and SpaceX began to shift in subtle, yet profound ways. Employees were talking more openly about their concerns and their ideas. Leaders began taking more responsibility for their team's well-being, and the overall atmosphere at both companies became more collaborative. But the real change, Musk realized, would take years. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long, but with each small step forward, Musk knew they were building something more sustainable. It wasn't just about pushing the boundaries of technology anymore. It was about building a company that people could be proud to work for, a company where success wasn't just defined by innovation, but by the people who drove it. And so, with a new sense of purpose, Elon Musk continued on his journey. The lessons learned from the trial, the pain of the past, and the hard work of rebuilding trust would stay with him forever. But now, more than ever, Musk was ready to face the future, not as a leader who demanded perfection, but as one who understood that true greatness lay in empowering the people who made it possible. With his newfound commitment to change, Musk thought the hardest battles were behind him. However, as the weeks went on, the underlying challenges became clearer. Not everyone was on board with his new approach. For some, his attempt to evolve into a more empathetic leader was seen as weakness, and for others, it was too little, too late. The cracks in the transformation started to show. While a portion of employees were supportive of Musk's efforts to improve company culture, there were many who felt this shift in leadership was just a passing phase, something that might disappear when the media scrutiny faded. And then there were the skeptics within his executive team, those who had risen to prominence by working in a culture of relentless drive and high expectations. To them, Musk's softer leadership style felt like a betrayal of everything they had worked for. Elon was aware of the whispers, the rumors spreading through the company about how he was losing his edge, how his focus on compassion was diluting the competitive spirit that had propelled the companies to success. There were murmurs that his new people-first agenda would result in lower productivity, fewer breakthroughs, and, ultimately, the downfall of the empire he had built. Some members of the board of directors even began to express concerns, questioning whether Musk had become too emotionally involved with his employees, and whether this would distract him from the primary mission of innovation. As the tension continued to grow, Musk found himself at a crossroads. Would he continue to fight for the kind of culture he had promised, or would he revert to his old ways, where results at any cost were the priority? For the first time, he was faced with a question that went beyond business. It was a moral dilemma, a question of what kind of leader, and ultimately what kind of person, he wanted to be. The tipping point came during an emergency meeting with the board. The discussion was tense as the executives argued over how best to handle a new issue, an upcoming product release that was running behind schedule. The team was already working long hours, and the pressure was mounting. Musk knew they could push through the crunch, but at what cost? As he sat there listening to his team's opinions, a decision became clear. It wasn't just about the release anymore. It was about defining the future of his companies and deciding who he was as a leader. Was he going to sacrifice the well-being of his employees to keep up with the pace of innovation? Or was there another way? "I can't just keep pushing people like this," Musk said, his voice calm but firm. "If we keep asking people to work in this way, we'll lose the trust we've built, and we'll lose the people who make this possible. We can't prioritize results over human lives. That's not why we're here." The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure how to respond. Some were nodding in agreement, while others looked skeptical. The tension in the room was palpable. One of the executives, a longtime colleague, spoke up. "Elon, we know you're trying to make changes, but this is a business. We have shareholders to answer to, investors to keep happy, and deadlines that we can't afford to miss. If we don't get this product out on time, we risk falling behind our competitors. We can't just keep making excuses." Musk's eyes narrowed. He understood the stakes. He had built his fortune on taking risks, on being bold, on pushing the limits of what was possible. But he was realizing now that there had to be a balance between ambition and humanity. He had been operating in a high-pressure, high-performance environment for so long that he hadn't considered the toll it was taking on his people. "I'm not making excuses," Musk said, his voice rising slightly. "What I'm saying is that we've built a culture where people are afraid to speak up, afraid to take time off, afraid to fail. That's not sustainable, and it's not what I want for this company. We can't just keep burning people out to meet deadlines. That's not how we succeed in the long term." The room fell silent as Musk's words settled. For the first time, he wasn't just the visionary CEO, he was speaking to them as a leader who cared about the people who worked for him. There were no easy answers, but the conversation had opened up a new path. It was clear that Musk wasn't going to back down from his vision, but he wasn't willing to sacrifice his people for the sake of success anymore. The meeting ended without a resolution, but it was clear that the company's culture would need to be overhauled, again. The conflict was far from over, but Musk knew that this was a defining moment in his journey. The next day, Musk held an all-hands meeting with Tesla employees to address the growing concerns. Standing before a room full of eager, tired faces, he felt the weight of the moment. "I know things are hard right now," Musk began, his voice softer than it had been in previous meetings. I've pushed all of you to your limits, and for that, I'm sorry. But I promise you, this company can't thrive unless we're all working together, not just in terms of our goals, but in the way we treat each other. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. We're going to take a step back and reassess. We're going to find new ways of working, ways that support each other, that prioritize mental health and work-life balance. But we will also keep pushing toward our goals. I know you all want to see Tesla succeed, but we can't do it at the cost of your well-being. The response was mixed. Some employees seemed relieved, grateful for the acknowledgement of their struggles. Others remained skeptical, wondering if this was just another temporary change. But Musk knew that the real work was only just beginning. The next few weeks would be critical in defining whether this change was real or simply a passing moment. There would be pushback, there would be setbacks, but Elon Musk had made a decision: he would not give up on his vision for a healthier, more sustainable company. This time, he would make sure that his employees were along for the ride, not just as workers, but as partners in the journey. As he walked away from the meeting, Musk felt both exhausted and energized. He knew it wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. The weeks after Musk's speech to the Tesla employees were filled with tension and uncertainty. Change, while necessary, never comes without resistance, and this new approach to leadership was no different. While some employees welcomed the newfound emphasis on their well-being, others remained suspicious. Musk had earned a reputation as a relentless, no-compromise leader, and many of his staff weren't convinced that the shift wasn't just another fleeting gesture in the midst of a media storm. For Musk, it was frustrating. He had been working tirelessly to right the ship, to prove to himself and to his team that he could lead in a way that valued humanity over blind ambition. But the skepticism weighed heavily on him. The pressure was still mounting, both externally and internally. The media, which had once lauded his every move, was now eager to scrutinize each step he took in this new chapter. It wasn't just Tesla that was under the microscope. SpaceX was facing its own set of challenges. The company had reached a major milestone with its Mars exploration project, but the timeline for the next phase was rapidly approaching, and the launch window was critical. The engineers at SpaceX were under immense pressure, and while Musk had promised to foster a more supportive environment, the reality of the deadline was unavoidable. There were whispers about the long hours, the stress, and the fatigue building in the ranks. Musk couldn't escape the weight of his responsibilities. For the first time in years, he was questioning whether he was truly capable of leading his companies in the direction he wanted to go. It was a lonely feeling, a man used to being surrounded by innovation and optimism now confronting the possibility that his vision might be too ambitious, his changes too little, and his leadership too late. The breaking point came one late evening at SpaceX. Musk had been working alongside engineers in the control room, trying to address the issues with the rocket's navigation system. The room was filled with the low hum of computers and the occasional click of keys as engineers furiously typed to find solutions to the technical challenges. It had been hours since anyone had taken a break. "Musk, we need to talk," one of the senior engineers, Sam, said, pulling Elon aside. His tone was serious, and Musk could tell from the look in his eyes that this was not going to be a casual conversation. "What's going on?" Musk asked, leaning against the nearest wall. "Look," Sam started, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "We're all here busting our asses to make this work. But, some of us are starting to feel like it's not enough. We're burnt out, Elon. This pace, this pressure, it's not sustainable. And with everything you've said about your new vision for Tesla and SpaceX, we're beginning to question whether you're really committed to that change." Musk felt a tightness in his chest. It was exactly the kind of conversation he feared, one where the gap between his vision and the reality of the work environment was too wide to ignore. "Sam," Musk said, his voice softening. "I know. And I've been trying to make it better. But the truth is, these deadlines, the timeline for Mars, the pressures of the world watching us, it's not easy for anyone. I'm asking more of you than anyone should have to give, and that's not fair. The room was silent for a moment, the only sound being the soft hum of machines in the background. Musk had spent so many years pushing the limits of what was possible that he hadn't noticed how close his team was to the edge. Sam looked at him, frustration and exhaustion mixed in his expression. You know, Elon, we want to change the world just as much as you do. But we're people, not machines. And right now, it feels like we're being asked to choose between working for you or having a life outside of here. That's not right. We need a leader who doesn't just demand greatness, but understands the price of it. Musk's stomach churned. The weight of those words hit harder than any media headline or public criticism. Sam was right. Musk had always pushed for the impossible, and in doing so, he had neglected to understand the true cost of that ambition, the human cost. Okay, Musk said finally, his voice steady. You're right. I've been too focused on the outcome, and I haven't been paying attention to the people who are making it possible. I'll do better. We'll do better. We'll find a way to meet these goals without sacrificing your well-being. Sam nodded, but the relief in his face was tempered by the skepticism of a man who had been burned before. The damage had already been done. It wasn't just about what Musk said anymore, it was about whether he could prove that change wasn't just words, but a reality. In the days that followed, Musk spent more time in the trenches. He made a concerted effort to meet with engineers, technicians, and employees across both Tesla and SpaceX, asking them what they needed, what was missing, and what was standing in their way. Musk began taking the time to listen, really listen, to his team. The feedback was eye-opening. Some employees asked for more manageable work schedules, others requested better mental health support, and some just wanted more open lines of communication with leadership. But even as Musk worked hard to integrate these changes, the road was filled with bumps. People were still burned out from years of non-stop work, and some of the most senior members of the leadership team remained committed to the old ways. They argued that success had been built on relentless work and that to change now would undermine everything the companies had achieved. The clash between the old guard and Musk's new direction created a rift. Musk had once thrived in the cutthroat, take no prisoners, world of Silicon Valley, but now, for the first time, he found himself questioning whether his vision could truly materialize. Was it too late? Had he waited too long to address the cracks in his leadership style? Could Tesla and SpaceX really evolve into organizations where people came first without losing the spark that had driven them to greatness? As the debate raged on within the company, the external pressure continued. Musk was in the spotlight more than ever. The media, which had once been enthralled by his every move, was now questioning his ability to juggle multiple projects while grappling with internal unrest. The scrutiny was unrelenting. Some wondered if Musk's public persona as a visionary was simply a mask for a leader who couldn't adapt to the realities of running massive, global companies. For the first time in his career, Musk felt truly vulnerable. There was no easy fix for the internal struggles, and no quick solution to prove his new leadership style was sustainable. The future was uncertain, and Musk knew he was at a crossroads. What would he choose? Would he bend to the pressure, reverting to his old ways, or would he fight for the kind of company that truly valued its people? The reckoning had arrived, and it was up to Musk to determine which direction he would take. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weight of the choices ahead of Elon Musk was more than just a business dilemma, it was personal. He had spent his entire life chasing the dream of revolutionizing the world with Tesla and SpaceX, but now he was being forced to reconcile the personal cost of that pursuit. The exhaustion and dissatisfaction were no longer just affecting his employees, they were beginning to affect him as well. Late nights filled with calculations and futuristic ideas had always been Musk's comfort zone, but now they felt hollow, overshadowed by his internal struggle. At home, things weren't much better. Musk had always been a workaholic, and his relationships had suffered because of it. His family had always been understanding, but the cracks were beginning to show. His estranged relationship with his children, especially his sons, weighed heavily on his heart. They had grown up in a world where their father was always at work, always pursuing a new goal, and always too busy to attend their school events or spend quality time with them. The damage done wasn't just to the companies, it was to the people closest to him. That week, a conversation with his oldest son, XAEA12, struck a chord. Musk had flown back home after weeks of back-to-back meetings and long nights at the office. His son, who had been quiet and distant during their interactions in the past, finally spoke up. The conversation began innocently enough, with X playing his favorite game on his tablet, but soon it took a turn that Musk hadn't expected. "Dad," X said without looking up from his screen, "why do you always work so much? Don't you want to spend time with me?" Elon felt a lump form in his throat. It was a question he had been avoiding for years. "I'm trying to change the world, buddy," Musk said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm working hard so that when you grow up, you'll live in a better world." X put down his tablet and looked up at his father. "But I don't need the world to be better, I just need you here." The words hit Musk like a ton of bricks. For all the technology he was pushing forward, all the innovation and space exploration, he had neglected the most important part of his life, his family. His heart ached as he realized that he had been trying so hard to make the world a better place, that he had forgotten about the people who truly mattered. His son wasn't asking for Mars colonies or self-driving cars, he was asking for his father's time. The next few days were a whirlwind for Musk. He attended several meetings, oversaw the testing of a new SpaceX rocket prototype, and had lengthy phone calls with his Tesla team, but his mind was elsewhere. The conversation with his son echoed in his head, pulling him away from the demands of his companies and forcing him to confront the one thing he had avoided for so long, his own personal life. He decided to take action. For the first time in a long time, Musk found himself turning down meetings, delegating responsibilities, and putting his family first. It was a risky move, especially given the ongoing pressure from investors and executives, but Elon knew that without his family's support, he wouldn't have the strength to carry on. His sons, particularly X, were growing up, and he didn't want to miss any more milestones in their lives. He scheduled a family vacation, something that had never been a priority for him before. He didn't want it to be just another trip where he worked on his laptop the whole time. Instead, he vowed to be present, to spend time with his children, and to really listen to them. It wasn't about showing up for a few photo ops, it was about showing up for them in a way that mattered. While at first, his employees and executives at Tesla and SpaceX were skeptical of Musk's decision to step back temporarily, they soon began to see the benefits of his new approach. As Elon took time off to reconnect with his children, he came back to the office with a renewed energy and a sharper focus. His time away had given him the clarity he needed to see what had been missing from his leadership all along: balance. But this balance wasn't just about his time. It was about the time of everyone at Tesla and SpaceX. Musk began pushing harder for a healthier work-life balance across the company. He worked on implementing flexible schedules, increased vacation days, and a better mental health support system for his employees. He took his responsibility as a leader more seriously, vowing to make sure his employees had the same opportunity to disconnect and recharge that he had. Despite the initial resistance, change started to take hold. Some employees were skeptical, afraid that the company would lose its competitive edge if they didn't keep up the relentless pace, but the benefits soon became clear. Employees felt more energized, more motivated, and more committed to the mission when they felt like their well-being was being prioritized. The numbers started to reflect this shift, productivity remained high, and even new product innovations started flowing faster as the team began to feel more connected and less burned out. As Musk spent more time focusing on his family and creating a culture that valued the people who worked at Tesla and SpaceX, something remarkable happened. He began to notice how his children, particularly X, were thriving. They seemed happier, more engaged, and less distant. It was clear that the time Musk had invested in them wasn't just about making memories, it was about rebuilding the bond that had been strained by years of his absence. One evening, while sitting on the porch with X, watching the sunset, his son looked at him and smiled. "Dad, I'm glad you're here." The words echoed in Musk's mind, a reminder of everything he had been fighting for, not just to change the world, but to be present in the lives of the people who mattered most. In that moment, Musk realized that the journey he was on wasn't just about conquering the future, it was about finding balance in the present. He knew that there would always be challenges ahead, both personally and professionally. But for the first time in years, he felt at peace with his choices. There would always be Mars, but there was no greater mission than the one he was living right now, the mission to reconnect with his family, to build a company that cared for its people, and to become the kind of leader who understood that success wasn't just about achievements, but about the relationships built along the way. The change in Musk's approach wasn't just a temporary shift, it marked the beginning of something bigger. A new era of leadership was unfolding before him, one where the people he led were just as important as the products they built. But not everyone was on board with this transformation. Some saw it as a sign of weakness, while others feared that it might cost Musk his edge. The workaholic, no-compromise CEO was an icon in Silicon Valley, and many felt that the world was watching to see if this softer version of Musk could still achieve the impossible. As the days went on, it became increasingly clear that the pressure on Musk wasn't going to ease up. The world was watching, waiting for him to slip, to falter in his efforts to balance work and family, to fail in his quest to reinvent leadership. The media was quick to highlight any moment where Musk appeared to slip back into his old ways, late nights at the office, comments that seemed to backpedal on his promises, or subtle signs that he wasn't fully committed to the changes he had started. It was a constant battle, not only against the expectations of the public and the media but also against his own habits and ingrained behavior. Musk knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he had made a promise to himself and his family. It was time to double down on this new approach. But as much as he believed in the changes, the challenge remained: could he balance the need for innovation and world-changing goals with the softer side of leadership, the part that focused on human connection, empathy, and well-being? His first test came when SpaceX reached a critical juncture in the development of its Starship project. The timeline was tight, and Musk knew that his leadership, his drive to push the envelope, had gotten them this far. But now, with his renewed commitment to creating a more balanced company culture, he found himself at a crossroads. Could he ask his team to go full throttle once again? Could he demand more from them without falling back into the old, grueling patterns that had led to burnout and resentment? The decision loomed over him as he prepared for a pivotal meeting with the SpaceX leadership team. The pressure was mounting. The launch of Starship was one of the most anticipated events in the history of space exploration, and the stakes were higher than ever. The media had already begun to report on delays and setbacks, and the clock was ticking. Elon entered the conference room, greeted by a sea of familiar faces. Some were loyal to the old ways of doing business, while others were more aligned with his recent vision for change. He took a deep breath and looked around the room. This wasn't just about Starship anymore. It was about something much bigger, the future of leadership in tech, the very soul of his companies, and the future of his relationships with his team. "All right, everyone," Musk began, his voice steady, yet carrying the weight of the moment. "We've come a long way, and I know how hard each of you has worked to get us here. But as much as I care about the mission, I also care about you, each of you. We've seen the burnout, the exhaustion, and we've learned the hard way that pushing ourselves into the ground doesn't yield the best results. So, here's the plan: I want us to finish strong, but I also want you to have time to rest, to recharge, and to be with your families." The room was quiet, and Musk could see the skepticism in the eyes of some of the team. They were used to the pressure, the constant drive to do more, to go faster. But Musk wasn't backing down. This was the future he was building, not just a company that achieved the impossible, but one that did so with care and respect for the people who made it all possible. "I know it's not going to be easy," Musk continued. "I'm not asking anyone to take their foot off the pedal. But I am asking for balance. We can meet these deadlines without sacrificing our well-being. And if we need to adjust the timeline, we will. The mission is important, but so are you." For a moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, the leadership team began to nod, slowly at first, and then with growing certainty. It wasn't just Musk's words that convinced them, but the sincerity behind them. They had seen the toll the relentless pace had taken on Musk, and now they saw a leader who had learned from his mistakes and was committed to something greater. "All right, let's make this work," Sam, the senior engineer, said, breaking the silence. "We'll finish Starship, but we'll do it the right way. We're with you, Elon." The tension in the room lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of camaraderie. It was a defining moment. Musk had taken a stand, not just for the success of SpaceX or Tesla, but for the well-being of his team, and in turn, he had earned their trust. It was clear that this new era of leadership wasn't just an abstract idea, it was a real, tangible shift that was already beginning to change the culture of the companies. But the external pressure was still there. The media, investors, and competitors were all watching, waiting for Musk to slip. He knew that one misstep could send the narrative spiraling back into the old story of an unrelenting, uncompromising CEO. But now, Musk felt more prepared than ever. He had made mistakes, yes, but he was learning from them. He was evolving. The next few weeks were a test of everything Musk had been working toward. SpaceX continued its work on Starship, but the pace had slowed, allowing the team to work smarter, not harder. Tesla saw similar changes, with an emphasis on innovation through collaboration rather than sheer force of will. The results were surprising. Productivity remained high, and the quality of work improved as employees felt more engaged and motivated. Musk, too, was seeing the benefits in his personal life. He was spending more time with his children, attending their events, and truly listening to their needs. His relationships were healing, and the connection he had once felt with his family was returning. It wasn't perfect, there would always be challenges, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path, both as a leader and as a father. But even as things seemed to be improving, Musk knew that the real test was still ahead. The world would continue to watch, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. But for now, he was confident that this new way of leadership, one that prioritized the people who made the companies what they were, was the key to unlocking the true potential of SpaceX, Tesla, and himself. It didn't take long for the media to catch wind of the changes happening at Tesla and SpaceX. Musk had made it clear that his companies would no longer function under the same pressure cooker environment they once had. The stories started trickling in, at first in an offhand way, mentions here and there about Musk's new leadership style or a softer approach to innovation. But soon, the headlines exploded. Elon Musk prioritizes employee well-being over results. Is this the end of SpaceX's mission to Mars? Can a CEO really lead without pushing his employees to the brink? Elon Musk tries something new. The news outlets couldn't resist making a spectacle of Musk's shift in focus. They'd seen him as a kind of tech superhero, a relentless, larger-than-life figure who would stop at nothing to push humanity forward. Now, they were faced with a much more human side of the billionaire. The headline suggested weakness, questioning if Musk was giving up the fight that had driven his empire. The investors weren't happy either. The stock prices were hovering just below what they considered acceptable, and the slow pace of product development had the suits at Tesla and SpaceX on edge. Shareholder calls were uncomfortable. Questions about how long Musk could continue to balance his family time with his company's growth came up frequently. During one particularly tense call with SpaceX investors, Musk was questioned directly. "Elon, we appreciate your concern for your employees, but we're running a business here. The timeline for Starship is crucial. If we delay the launch any longer, we risk losing our edge. You know how this industry works. You've built your reputation on pushing boundaries. So, what's changed? Musk had been bracing for this question. He had anticipated the skepticism, but the question still stung. He was not someone who took kindly to being questioned on his commitment to innovation. But, he also knew that his shift in leadership had to be steadfast if it was going to work. Look, Musk said, pausing as if to measure his words carefully. I understand the pressure, and I know how much is riding on Starship. But we're also building something that's not just about rockets and cars. It's about the people who make this possible. If we burn them out, we lose the long game. We lose the very people who will take us to Mars and beyond. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You think we're losing the long game by slowing down? This isn't a therapy session, Elon. We're talking about billions of dollars. I'm not asking for a complete slowdown, Musk responded. I'm asking for sustainable growth. I'm asking for a future where the people working on this mission can stay in the game for the long haul. There was a pause before the investor spoke again. We'll see if this works, Musk. But you're walking a fine line. If the results don't come through, people are going to start questioning your vision. Musk hung up the phone with a sigh, staring at the wall as the weight of their words lingered in the air. Was he making the right choice? Was he going to lose the very momentum that had made his companies so successful in the first place? Despite the doubts creeping into his mind, Musk knew that this wasn't just about money or status anymore. He had to prove that a company could thrive while also caring for its people. For years, the tech world had been ruled by the philosophy that the ends justified the means. But now, Musk was challenging that belief. Could the ends still justify the means if the means were healthier, more sustainable, and more compassionate? The media didn't make it easy. Rumors swirled about Musk losing his edge, and competitors took the opportunity to pounce. Jeff Bezos, who had been keeping a low profile with Blue Origin, couldn't resist taking a jab at Musk's new philosophy in a press interview. People who are too soft, Bezos said with a thinly veiled smirk, don't make it to the top of the tech world. If you don't push yourself and your team relentlessly, you'll never break the barriers that are holding humanity back. Elon's recent shift might be a nice idea in theory, but the world doesn't wait for anyone. Musk, ever the competitor, couldn't let the remark slide. He issued a terse response via Twitter, as he was wont to do. Jeff, with all due respect, maybe if you focused more on advancing space exploration and less on tearing others down, we'd all get to space a lot quicker. The tweet set the media on fire. Headlines blared, Musk versus Bezos, the ultimate showdown, followed by a slew of sensationalized articles dissecting every syllable of the exchange. The rivalry between the two billionaires had always been a subject of public fascination, but now it was taking a new turn. Musk wasn't just competing with Bezos for dominance in the space race, he was challenging the very foundation of what it meant to be a successful leader in the tech world. As the media firestorm raged on, Musk found himself grappling with a new kind of pressure. He had always been able to ignore the critics, but now, with his new approach to leadership, he felt more vulnerable. He wasn't just under pressure to innovate, he was under pressure to show that his way of doing business could work. That it was possible to build companies that thrived, not just on profits, but on people. In the midst of all this, Musk began to notice something strange. The employees at Tesla and SpaceX, those who had been most skeptical of his new vision, were starting to come around. They saw that Musk's changes weren't just about him getting more time with his family or showing a softer side. It was about creating an environment where they, too, could thrive, not just for the company's success but for their own well-being. Musk had made a decision that many would call risky. But for him, it wasn't about proving anyone wrong or right. It was about leading in a way that was true to his own evolving understanding of what it meant to be a leader. And in that understanding, he found the strength to continue, no matter how much the media or critics tried to derail him. The weeks following Musk's media clash with Jeff Bezos were marked by a constant whirlwind of public scrutiny. His decision to prioritize his employees' well-being over the relentless pace of innovation was not only controversial, it was turning into a full-scale spectacle. The media had found its new favorite narrative: was Elon Musk losing his edge? Was his time of pushing the limits of human innovation over? It was a question that followed Musk everywhere. It was in every tweet, every news report, and every investor call. It was as though the world couldn't comprehend the idea that a tech giant, who had once been seen as the embodiment of disruption at all costs, was now trying to balance humanity with progress. Musk found himself torn between two realities. On one hand, his vision for a better, more sustainable way of leading his companies had started to take root within the teams at Tesla and SpaceX. Employees seemed more motivated, with reports showing a surge in productivity despite the gentler approach. On the other hand, external forces, media scrutiny, investors' demands, and competitors, were pulling him in the opposite direction, forcing him to reconsider whether this new path was sustainable or even worth the risk. The pressure began to weigh heavily on Musk, not just professionally, but personally. He had spent years building his empire, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his shift in leadership was undermining everything he had worked for. The criticism from the media was only part of it. The real struggle was the fear that he might be letting down the very people who had been with him from the beginning, the ones who had believed in his vision of a future that went beyond the confines of Earth. Would they still respect him? Would they still be able to follow him if he showed signs of vulnerability? On a late afternoon, in the midst of a particularly tough week, Musk sat alone in his office. His desk was cluttered with papers, reports, and reminders of the work that still needed to be done. But his mind wasn't on any of that. It was consumed with the thought of what was happening to his legacy. He stared at his phone, debating whether to check his social media or not. It had been a constant barrage of mixed messages since the Bezos incident, some supporting him for trying to take a more humane approach, others mocking him for being too soft. The thing that caught his attention, however, was an article that had just been posted by a prominent tech journalist. The headline read, "Elon Musk's soft leadership, can he still change the world?" Musk clicked on the article, his finger lingering for a moment as he scanned the first few lines. The piece painted a picture of Musk as a man caught between two worlds, the visionary who had redefined industries and the man now trying to appease the needs of a growing workforce. The journalist wrote, "Once a man who built his empire on sleepless nights and relentless drives, Musk is now taking a bold step into uncharted territory. But can the man who once called his companies mission-driven, not people-driven, truly find success in this new leadership paradigm? Or is this a sign of weakness, a reflection of Musk's growing concern about his own mortality and legacy?" Musk put the phone down, his eyes narrowing. It was a fair point, in a way. He had, for years, been the archetype of the relentless founder, driving himself and his teams to achieve the seemingly impossible. But now, the world was asking whether he could be both a compassionate leader and an innovator. Was that even possible? He thought about the meeting he had with the SpaceX team earlier in the week. The employees had rallied behind him, supporting the idea of working smarter instead of harder. They had even begun to appreciate the changes, but now, Musk wasn't so sure. Could he keep them engaged and innovative while fostering a healthier work-life balance? Could he maintain that sense of urgency, that drive for greatness, without sacrificing the personal well-being of his employees? But then, as the silence of his office enveloped him, something clicked. He wasn't trying to make everyone happy, he was trying to make them better. And that included himself. The relentless pursuit of success had come at a cost. It had cost him his peace of mind, his relationships, and his health. He had realized that progress wasn't just about hitting deadlines and milestones. It was about sustainability, about creating something that would last, not just for the next quarter, but for the next generation. The internal struggle continued, but Musk was starting to find clarity. He wasn't abandoning his vision. He wasn't letting the world's opinions dictate his future. But he had learned that true leadership was about more than making bold decisions. It was about showing vulnerability, being adaptable, and building teams that could thrive together. It was about setting an example, not just of success, but of resilience in the face of change. The next morning, Musk addressed the media again. He knew it was inevitable. There was no avoiding the questions, the rumors, or the doubts. "I've been called many things over the years, visionary, ruthless, relentless," Musk began in the press conference, his voice steady but carrying a hint of something deeper. "But I've also learned that leadership isn't about perfection. It's about learning, adapting, and making choices that reflect the future we want to create. And right now, that means making decisions that allow us to innovate while ensuring that the people behind the work are supported and heard." The press room was quiet. Journalists leaned in, eager for the next headline, the next soundbite. But Musk didn't stop there. "We're all human," he continued. "And if we want to build the future, we have to take care of the people who are going to get us there. The road ahead won't be easy, but if we're going to achieve the impossible, we'll do it together. I'm not perfect, but I'm committed to leading in a way that's sustainable, not just for us, but for the generations that will follow." There was a noticeable shift in the room. The tone of the media had started to change. Musk's words, though simple, carried a depth that resonated with his audience. He wasn't just defending himself, he was making a statement that leadership, real leadership, wasn't about dominance. It was about collaboration, compassion, and the strength to evolve. Musk's speech to the press was a turning point. The world had been watching his every move, waiting for him to either reaffirm his status as the relentless innovator they had once known or shift into something else entirely. The media storm surrounding his leadership style had reached a crescendo, but his address gave the public something to consider. Perhaps this new side of Musk wasn't the softening of a once fierce leader. Perhaps it was evolution. The backlash wasn't over, but it had started to change. There were still critics who questioned whether Musk's companies could maintain their edge in a world that demanded not just progress but fast, relentless progress. But others, especially those within his companies, were starting to see a different side of the man they had followed for years. At SpaceX, the mood had shifted. Employees who had once burned the candle at both ends, pushing through grueling hours and unrealistic expectations, were now coming to work with renewed energy. There were no longer endless late-night email chains or unnecessary weekend shifts. Instead, there were more team lunches, more open discussions about the future of space exploration, and more time dedicated to thinking outside the box. The real test, however, came during a high-stakes project at Tesla. The company was working on a revolutionary battery design that could significantly improve both the performance of their cars and the sustainability of their energy solutions. Musk knew that this project could be the breakthrough that solidified Tesla's leadership in the market for years to come. But the project wasn't progressing as smoothly as he'd hoped. The engineers were facing challenges they hadn't anticipated, and the deadline was fast approaching. The pressure was mounting, and the temptation to revert to his old ways, pushing the team to the brink, demanding long hours and non-stop work, was strong. But this time, Musk held back. He reminded himself of the lessons he'd learned over the past few months. Innovation wasn't just about pushing harder, it was about giving people the space to think, to fail, and to succeed. Instead of demanding faster results, he made a different decision. He called for a meeting with the team, one that wasn't about deadlines or progress reports, but about understanding the challenges they were facing. "I know we're all feeling the pressure," Musk began, standing at the front of the room. "But let's take a step back. We're not going to solve this by working ourselves into the ground. We need to think this through, together. If we're going to make this breakthrough, we have to approach it with the same creativity and problem-solving that got us here in the first place." It was a stark contrast to the approach Musk had taken in the past, where urgency and speed had always been the top priority. But now, he was focused on collaboration and allowing the team the time and space to come up with innovative solutions. The team responded positively. There was a sense of relief in the room, as if the pressure to meet the deadline had been lifted, allowing them to approach the challenge from a new perspective. For Musk, this was a defining moment. He saw the team's energy shift. They weren't just complying with orders anymore, they were actively engaged, sharing ideas, and collaborating in ways that Musk hadn't seen in years. He had made the right call. And even though the timeline would stretch beyond what was originally planned, Musk felt confident that this approach would lead to better results in the long run. Meanwhile, at SpaceX, the renewed sense of purpose and camaraderie among the team began to translate into real progress. The engineers who had once been pushed to their limits were now more focused, more driven by the sense that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They weren't just building rockets, they were building the future of humanity. The shift didn't just affect Musk's companies. The wider tech community took notice. Competitors, who had once dismissed Musk's softer approach as a temporary phase, began to reconsider their own leadership styles. Rivals who had prided themselves on their relentless pursuit of profit and success started to question whether they too should focus more on the well-being of their employees. They were realizing that a work environment where people thrived was not only better for the individual, it was better for the business as well. In the midst of all this, Musk's relationship with the public began to change. The press that had once painted him as a workaholic, often bordering on obsessive, started to highlight the human side of Musk, the leader who was willing to put people first, even at the risk of slowing down progress. Articles that once questioned his leadership now spoke of the potential for a new era in business, one where empathy and innovation could coexist. But there were still moments when the old pressures resurfaced. Musk was constantly balancing the needs of his companies with the expectations of the world. He had made the decision to slow down and focus on sustainability, but there was always the underlying fear that the competition was not waiting. That they would leave him behind while he adjusted his pace. And then, one morning, the call came. It was from the government agency overseeing SpaceX's Starship program. They had been tracking the progress of the project and had seen the delays that were becoming harder to justify. Musk knew that the government had already invested billions into the program. They were not as patient as his employees or even his investors. The conversation started calmly enough, but the tone quickly turned serious. "Elon, we need to talk about Starship. The delays are getting concerning. You've made it clear that you want to take your time with this, but we're reaching a point where we need to see results. The public is growing impatient, and the funding is becoming an issue." Musk sat back in his chair, feeling the familiar weight of pressure creeping back into his chest. But this time, he wasn't going to let it dictate his next move. He wasn't going to return to the old ways of cutting corners or burning out his team. He had a new strategy, a strategy that balanced progress with care. "I understand the situation," Musk said, his voice steady. "But I'm not going to sacrifice quality for speed. If we push too hard, we'll end up with a half-baked solution. And that's not how we do things at SpaceX. We're going to take the time we need to get this right." The conversation ended with a promise to keep working closely together, but Musk knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The world was watching, and the pressure to deliver was immense. But this time, he was determined to stick to his guns. He was ready to face the challenges of leading with empathy, and proving that it could work in the long run. Musk knew that the path ahead wasn't going to be easy. The pressure was mounting from all sides. SpaceX's Starship program was facing more delays, Tesla's battery project had hit more snags than anticipated, and the media was still relentlessly questioning whether Musk's shift in leadership was a sign of weakness. But amidst the chaos, there was something different this time. Musk felt a deeper resolve. His decision to change the culture of his companies wasn't a fleeting one. It was a commitment to a new kind of leadership, and he was determined to see it through. The challenge was no longer just about pushing his teams to deliver results. It was about creating a sustainable environment where those results could be achieved while maintaining the health and well-being of the people making it happen. It was about leadership that didn't just look at the end goal but considered the journey, the people walking beside him, the struggles they faced, and the emotional toll that relentless ambition could take. For the first time in years, Musk wasn't just a CEO, he was a mentor, a coach, a partner. The old Musk, driven, sometimes abrasive, always demanding, had given way to a more reflective leader. A leader who understood that the best way to push boundaries wasn't through sheer willpower, but through collaboration, understanding, and trust. But as the weeks passed, Musk found that the greatest challenge of all wasn't external pressure, it was internal. He was constantly battling the voice inside his head that told him to push harder, to work faster, to ignore the need for balance. It was the voice of the man who had built his empire on sheer grit and determination. The voice that had kept him awake at night, working tirelessly to get his companies off the ground. It was a hard battle to fight. It was tempting to fall back into old habits, ramping up the pressure, demanding results, forcing people to meet deadlines at any cost. And with so much at stake, Musk often wondered if the risk of not pushing hard enough was worse than the risk of burning out. One particularly difficult day, as Musk sat in his office looking over the latest round of reports, he received a call from Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president and COO. She was known for her no-nonsense approach and her ability to get things done, and Musk respected her immensely. She was one of the few people who could challenge him directly without fear of repercussions. "Elon, we need to talk about Starship. The government's getting antsy, and the timeline is slipping again. You know how important this is. We can't afford to lose momentum. We've got investors, contractors, and politicians all breathing down our necks. If we don't hit this next milestone, there's going to be serious fallout." Musk rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar weight of the situation settle in his chest. It was true. SpaceX's timeline had slipped, again, and this time, the stakes felt higher than ever. The government had invested too much money, and Musk had made promises to push humanity to Mars. Every delay, every misstep felt like a personal failure. "I know, Gwynne," Musk said quietly, his voice tinged with frustration. "But I can't keep pushing the team like this. We've already been through too much. I need to make sure we're building something sustainable, not just something that will get us to the next milestone. The people who are making this happen, they matter. We can't afford to burn them out." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Gwynne wasn't one to mince words, and Musk could almost hear her thinking before she spoke. "I get it, Elon," she said finally, her tone softening. "But we also can't afford to miss the mark on this. You've built something extraordinary, and we can't let that slip. You've always told us that the impossible is possible. But it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take a little bit of sacrifice. Right now, the team needs you to be the leader they've always followed. They need you to show them the way forward." Musk sighed, looking out the window at the sprawling Tesla campus below. The weight of the world felt heavier than ever, but Gwynne's words stuck with him. She was right. Leadership was about more than just making the right decisions, it was about making the tough calls when they mattered most. And in that moment, Musk knew what he had to do. "I'll make it work," he said, his voice firm. "I'll find a way to get this done. But we're doing it with care. No more pushing people to the breaking point. I've made that mistake before. It's time to lead differently." Gwynne was quiet for a moment, and then she spoke again. "Good. We'll support you, Elon. We're in this together." With that, Musk ended the call, feeling a sense of clarity wash over him. The challenge ahead was still immense, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone in it. He had the support of his team, and more importantly, he had the support of himself, his vision, his values, and his commitment to lead with purpose and empathy. Later that week, Musk made another bold move. He called a meeting with all the key players at Tesla and SpaceX to address the growing tensions surrounding the projects. The room was filled with engineers, designers, and executives, each one feeling the strain of their respective roles. Musk stood at the front of the room, looking out at the faces of the people who had been with him for years, some from the very beginning. "I know the last few months have been difficult," Musk began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. There's been a lot of pressure, and I've asked more from you than anyone should. But I want you all to know that I see the sacrifices you're making. You're not just employees, you're the ones who are making the impossible happen. And we're going to do this together, but we're going to do it the right way. The room was silent as Musk continued. I promise you that we'll move forward with a renewed focus on balance. We'll push the boundaries of innovation, but we'll do it with respect for the people who are making it happen. No more shortcuts, no more burning out the team. We're building something for the future, and we can't do that if we don't take care of each other. As Musk finished speaking, there was a palpable shift in the room. The tension, which had been thick in the air, seemed to dissipate. People were starting to believe that this new approach, one that balanced ambition with empathy, might actually work. It was a turning point, not just for Musk, but for the entire culture of his companies. But the real test was still ahead. The timeline for Starship was still slipping, and the pressure was still mounting. The world was watching, waiting for Musk to deliver. But this time, Musk wasn't just focused on the destination. He was focused on the journey. And that, in itself, was the real challenge. The weeks that followed Musk's speech to his team at Tesla and SpaceX were filled with intense focus and deliberate action. While his commitment to a new leadership style was being put to the test, the challenges of running two of the most ambitious companies in the world never stopped. For Musk, the weight of the world, quite literally, in the case of SpaceX's goal of interplanetary exploration, rested squarely on his shoulders. But this time, he was not simply trying to bear that weight alone. He was leaning into his team, his newfound philosophy of leadership, and his commitment to sustainability, not just for his companies, but for the people behind them. The Tesla battery project was still far from completion, with delays creeping in as teams struggled to solve technical problems, and the testing process was ongoing. But Musk had adopted a new mindset. Instead of pushing harder to force breakthroughs, he encouraged his engineers to approach the task with creativity and patience. No longer did he want to see his team working around the clock to meet deadlines. Instead, he sought to create an environment where innovation could thrive on its own terms. At SpaceX, Starship had become the project everyone was talking about. Every setback seemed to come with an equal amount of excitement, because, after all, the potential to revolutionize space travel was far too significant to ignore. But with mounting pressure from both government agencies and investors, Musk knew that Starship had to fly. It had to succeed. Not just for SpaceX, but for humanity's future. Musk had been through plenty of setbacks, but this was different. This project had the potential to change the course of history, and if they failed, it would feel like the weight of that failure would be felt across the entire world. Every single step had to be precise, every calculation perfect. But the team's morale was higher than ever before. They had confidence not just in the project, but in Musk as their leader. The newly adopted mindset was starting to take shape. Despite these advancements, one thing loomed larger than all the technical challenges: the media. The press had begun to change their tone. They were no longer simply reporting on Musk's eccentricities or his seemingly erratic behavior. The new narrative was emerging, one that acknowledged his vulnerabilities, his shift in leadership, and the cultural transformation happening inside his companies. They were following the story closely, wondering if this new approach could actually work or if Musk would crack under the pressure. At the same time, Musk's personal life had started to come into focus as well. The media was quick to latch onto every detail of his relationships, his family, and his private life. His growing connection with his children was evident. He made time for them in a way he never had before. His late-night work sessions were replaced with trips to the park, time spent reading stories, and bonding with his sons over robotics and science fiction. It was a side of Musk that the public rarely saw, and one that resonated with many who saw him as a figure of untouchable genius. But even in this quieter, more reflective phase of his life, Musk was still being bombarded with the enormous weight of his responsibilities. As his public image evolved, so did the scrutiny. Every decision was magnified, and the world watched to see how he would handle the mounting pressures. The delicate balance of work and family, ambition and humanity, was becoming more challenging to maintain. It all came to a head one chilly afternoon when Musk received a phone call from a key government official, a representative from NASA, who was overseeing the Mars colonization efforts. The conversation began civilly, but the tone quickly shifted. The delays on Starship were becoming impossible to ignore, and the funding for the program was beginning to come into question. "Elon, we need results," the voice on the other end of the line said. "We've invested billions in this program, and the public is getting restless. You've promised the world that we will be on Mars by 2025, but at this rate, it seems unlikely." Musk leaned back in his chair, his hand gripping the phone tightly. He could feel the pressure mounting in his chest. He had always believed in the vision of interplanetary travel, but now, with so much on the line, the burden felt heavier than ever. The world had been promised progress, and now it was demanding it. "I understand the urgency," Musk said, keeping his voice steady. "But we're not going to rush this. Starship has to be perfect. We can't afford a failure." There was a pause on the other end. When the voice spoke again, it was calm, but the undercurrent of frustration was evident. "Elon, I get it. But time is running out. We need a plan that shows clear, actionable results. The public doesn't want to hear about delays anymore." Musk's mind raced, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His commitment to a sustainable work culture and a balanced approach to leadership had been a point of pride, but now he was faced with a real test. Could he maintain this new way of thinking under the pressure of an entire world waiting for him to succeed? "I'll make sure we have a plan," Musk said after a moment of silence. "But it's going to take some time. We can't rush perfection." The call ended, and Musk sat in silence for a long while, staring out at the sprawling landscape beyond his office. The reality of the situation hit him hard. The world was watching, and they were impatient. They didn't care about his new leadership style or his focus on sustainability. They wanted results, and they wanted them now. But as he sat there, reflecting on his journey so far, Musk knew that the battle wasn't just about delivering results, it was about delivering the right results. He wasn't willing to sacrifice the people who had made his companies what they were. He couldn't go back to the old ways, where everything and everyone was expendable for the sake of progress. Musk rose from his desk and made his way to the SpaceX engineering floor. He needed to see his team. He needed to remind them why they were doing this, why they were working together, why they were pushing the boundaries of possibility. They weren't just building a rocket to send people to Mars. They were creating something that would change the future of humanity forever. "All right, team," Musk said as he entered the room, his voice filled with determination. "I know things are tough right now, but we're not giving up. We're going to find a way to make this work, and we're going to do it together. It might not be easy, but we're going to keep pushing. Because what we're building isn't just about one person's vision. It's about all of us working toward a future we can all be proud of." There was a moment of silence, and then the room erupted in applause. Musk could feel the energy in the room shift. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was theirs too. Together, they could take on the weight of the world. But as they set to work once again, Musk knew the real battle had just begun. He wasn't just fighting to change the world, he was fighting to change the way the world saw leadership, and to prove that empathy, patience, and collaboration could lead to the greatest breakthroughs of all. As the days turned into weeks, and the pressure from both the public and the government grew, Elon Musk found himself walking a fine line. The relentless demands to produce results on a timeline that was quickly slipping away weighed heavily on his mind. His commitment to leading differently, to focusing on sustainability, mental health, and empathy, was beginning to feel like a distant ideal. The overwhelming expectation to deliver on his promises was pushing him to the edge of his endurance. It wasn't just the external pressures that were taking a toll on Musk. Despite his efforts to change the company culture, he couldn't escape the fact that he was still, in many ways, the driving force behind every decision. He was still the one making the final call, still the one who needed to make the impossible seem possible. The media, which had once been so fascinated by his every move, began to turn their attention to his seemingly erratic behavior. Some headlines painted him as a visionary, while others questioned whether his methods were sustainable. Musk found himself surrounded by a whirlwind of conflicting opinions, and the weight of public perception became just as heavy as the burdens of his work. One particular morning, as Musk sat in his office at SpaceX, his phone buzzed with a new notification. It was a news article that made his stomach drop. The headline read, "Elon Musk's Mars mission in jeopardy, is his leadership style causing more harm than good?" The article detailed concerns from both industry insiders and former SpaceX employees about the toll that Musk's leadership style was taking on his teams. It cited an increase in stress-related resignations, burnout, and, most troubling of all, rumors that Musk himself was close to a breakdown. Musk stared at the headline for a long moment, the weight of it settling in. It felt like the world was slowly turning against him. The article was full of quotes from people who had worked closely with him, people who once admired him, now questioning his ability to lead in a sustainable way. The public perception was beginning to shift in a direction he hadn't anticipated. The very same traits that had once made him a rock star of Silicon Valley, the same traits that had led him to change the world, were now being scrutinized under a magnifying glass. Were his ambitious goals worth it if they cost him his health, his employees, and the future of his companies? As Musk sank back into his chair, the pressure of it all seemed to double. He had been pushing himself and his teams to the brink for so long, but was it really worth it? Was he sacrificing too much in the name of progress? His phone buzzed again, this time with a text message from Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president and COO. He had always trusted Gwynne, but he knew that whatever she had to say would be difficult to hear. "We need to talk. This article is just the beginning. The team is starting to feel the strain. Let's meet later today. I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." Musk stared at the message for a moment. His gut told him what the conversation would be about, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to face it. But there was no avoiding it. If things continued down this path, he risked losing everything, his companies, his vision, and the very team that had worked tirelessly by his side for years. That afternoon, Musk met with Gwynne in her office at SpaceX. The room was quiet, but the tension between them was palpable. Gwynne sat behind her desk, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Musk sat across from her, his mind racing. He knew that this conversation could be the turning point, the moment when everything changed. "Elon," Gwynne began, her voice steady but firm. "I've been with you for a long time, and I've seen you go through a lot. But this is different. The pressure is taking its toll on you, and it's taking its toll on the team." Musk exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. "I know. I can feel it. But I don't know how to stop. The world is expecting us to do the impossible. We can't afford to fail now." "We're not going to fail," Gwynne replied. "But you need to take a step back. We need you to be the leader we've always known you to be. Not the person pushing everyone to the breaking point. You've always been driven by a vision. But now you need to focus on the people making that vision a reality. If we're going to make it through this, we need a leader who can balance ambition with care." Musk felt a lump form in his throat. He knew Gwynne was right, but the fear of failure was so strong. If he eased up now, would they lose everything? Would they miss their shot at Mars? At revolutionizing space travel? "Gwynne, I don't know how to stop," Musk admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "I don't know how to slow down when the world is moving so fast. Everything I've done, everything we've done, it's all leading to this. What happens if I take a step back and it all falls apart?" Gwynne leaned forward, her voice softening. "Elon, you're not alone in this. We're all here to support you. But you need to trust us, and you need to trust yourself. No one person can carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And if you keep going like this, you're going to break. You're going to lose what matters most. Musk stared at her, the truth of her words sinking in. He had always been the one to push forward, the one to carry the vision. But what was the point of that vision if it cost him everything he had built? I've been so focused on the destination, Musk said quietly. I've forgotten about the journey. And the people who are with me on this journey. Gwyn nodded. It's not too late to change course. But it has to happen now. For the sake of your health, for the sake of your teams, and for the sake of your vision. Musk sat in silence for a long time, considering her words. The road ahead would still be difficult. The pressure would remain. But if he wanted to lead in a way that mattered, if he wanted to build something that could endure, he had to let go of the old ways. It was time to rewrite the narrative, not just for his companies, but for himself. The impossible could still be achieved, but it would take more than sheer willpower. It would take empathy, understanding, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. As he left Gwyn's office, Musk felt a sense of relief. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was walking it with his team, not just ahead of them. The journey had only just begun. The next few weeks were a blur of late-night meetings, team huddles, and moments of reflection for Musk. The turning point that had come with Gwyn's words had finally begun to sink in. He wasn't just the founder of SpaceX and Tesla, he was also the steward of his own well-being, of the team he had spent years building. The reality was hard to swallow at first. He could no longer drive the company forward alone, pushing through endless obstacles in a state of self-inflicted burnout. His companies, his dreams, and the future of humanity's reach for the stars depended not just on his genius, but on the collective efforts of those around him. But it wasn't easy. For years, Musk had built his identity around relentless drive, an insatiable appetite for the next big challenge. The idea of slowing down, of letting others take the reins more often, was both liberating and terrifying. Still, change was inevitable, and Musk knew it was time. He began to take more time to connect with his employees, not just as their CEO, but as a colleague. He opened up about his own vulnerabilities, about the personal toll of balancing the weight of two world-changing companies. He found himself spending hours in the break rooms at Tesla and SpaceX, listening to the thoughts and ideas of his engineers, asking questions, and providing encouragement. He didn't want to be the man who only inspired through sheer willpower and grandiosity, he wanted to be the leader who inspired through connection. Through authenticity. It wasn't about giving up his ambition or stepping away from his vision. It was about reimagining what leadership could look like in a world that demanded so much from its trailblazers. One morning, he called a meeting with both his Tesla and SpaceX leadership teams. The mood in the room was different, there was an air of curiosity, of willingness to listen, and maybe even of hope. "All right, team," Musk began, his voice steady but filled with newfound sincerity. "You all know that I've been pushing hard. Too hard. We've made incredible strides, and we've reached milestones that seemed impossible just a few years ago. But we're at a turning point. And I need you to hear this, what we're building is not just for the future. It's for the people who are here now. It's for the people who are making it happen." He paused, looking around the room. His gaze lingered on faces he had known for years, faces that had weathered the storm alongside him. "I want us to create a new culture. One where ambition still drives us, but where we take care of each other. Where innovation isn't just about the next product, but about creating a better work environment, one that fosters creativity and balance. I've made mistakes in the past. I've pushed too hard. But I'm committed to changing that, and I need your help." The room was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, people began to nod in agreement. It was clear that his shift in leadership was resonating, even if it was hard to grasp in the beginning. Musk wasn't just asking for their buy-in, he was showing them that it was possible to break the cycle of burnout and still achieve greatness. The meeting ended with a sense of resolve, and for the first time in months, Musk felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The conversation had been difficult, but it had been necessary. Change was never easy, but it was possible. Meanwhile, the pressure from NASA was mounting. Musk knew that the Starship project had to succeed, and that the timeline was growing shorter by the day. But he also knew that the future of space exploration would be defined not just by the success of one rocket or one mission, but by the sustainable practices and culture that SpaceX embodied. A few days after the leadership meeting, Musk found himself standing on the launch pad at SpaceX's Boca Chica facility, gazing up at the towering Starship prototype. It was a sight that never failed to fill him with awe, a symbol of human potential and ambition. But this time, as he stood there, he saw something different. He didn't just see a rocket. He saw a community. He saw engineers who had worked tirelessly to design it. He saw a company that had overcome countless challenges to get to this point. And he saw the people who had stood by him, even when things seemed impossible. As he spoke with the team, a few of them approached him with a proposal. They had come up with a new idea, one that could potentially speed up the development process without sacrificing the quality of the final product. It was an innovative solution, but it required a shift in their current approach. Musk listened carefully. He could feel the enthusiasm in their voices, the energy of a team that had found new purpose. It was a stark contrast to the days when he had been the one making every decision, pushing everyone to the brink. He realized, in that moment, that he didn't have all the answers. The best ideas, the greatest breakthroughs, often came from those who were closest to the problem. He didn't need to carry the burden of all the answers on his own anymore. "You guys are onto something," Musk said, a rare smile crossing his face. "Let's take this to the next level. Let's see if we can make it work together." As the team celebrated, Musk took a step back. The rocket was still the ultimate goal, but the people who made it possible had become just as important, if not more so. The energy in the air was different. It was a feeling of collaboration, of mutual respect, of shared ambition. As SpaceX continued to prepare for its next big test, Musk found himself reconnecting with his broader vision. Mars wasn't just a destination anymore. It was a symbol of what humanity could achieve, and it worked together, when it took care of each other, and when it placed value on both progress and the people who drove it forward. Back at Tesla, progress was also being made. The gigafactories were pushing forward, and the future of electric vehicles was taking shape faster than ever. The roadmap for sustainable energy was clearer than it had been before, and Musk's renewed focus on his teams was creating ripples of change throughout the organization. Employees were beginning to feel more empowered, more engaged. And for the first time in years, Musk felt like he was leading not just for the future of his companies, but for the future of the people who helped make them a reality. The road ahead was still uncertain. The stakes were high. But Musk knew that he didn't have to carry the weight alone. He had a team, a vision, and the resolve to see it through. This wasn't just about rockets or cars anymore. This was about creating a legacy, one where leadership wasn't defined by what you could do alone, but by what you could achieve when you empowered others to rise with you. And as the sun began to set over the SpaceX launch pad, Musk allowed himself a moment of peace. He had started a revolution, but the true challenge had always been in how he led it. Now, he was finally ready to lead with strength, humility, and the knowledge that the greatest breakthroughs came from those who were willing to change. The weeks leading up to the final test of the Starship prototype were filled with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. SpaceX had come a long way since its humble beginnings, and now, with Mars in sight, the company stood at the precipice of something that could forever change humanity's future. Musk had done everything in his power to set the company up for success, but he knew that this moment, the culmination of years of effort, would define not just his legacy, but the direction of space exploration for generations to come. Despite the constant scrutiny and pressure, Musk had found a new sense of peace in the way he approached leadership. No longer solely focused on pushing boundaries for the sake of pushing boundaries, he was now more aware of the people around him. He had surrounded himself with a team that believed in the mission just as fiercely as he did, but unlike in the past, he didn't demand that they sacrifice their well-being for success. It was about balance now, and for the first time in his life, he was learning to lead in a way that wasn't all-consuming. Yet, as the day of the final launch drew nearer, the reality of what was at stake set in. SpaceX wasn't just launching a rocket, they were launching a new era. This was the moment when all the sacrifices, the late nights, the heartbreaks, and the breakthroughs would either culminate in triumph, or disaster. The news was abuzz with speculation. Headlines ranged from Musk's Mars mission, will it really happen, to SpaceX, the final frontier or an overhyped dream. The pressure from both the public and the government felt heavier than ever before. But for Musk, there was something more profound at stake. Gwyn had been a constant source of support during this time. She had seen him through countless challenges over the years, and now, as the launch neared, she pulled him aside one last time to offer a few words. "Elon," she said, her voice calm but firm, "no matter what happens, this has been an extraordinary journey. You've done what no one thought was possible. You've made people believe in space travel again, in a way that no one ever thought could happen in our lifetime. I know how much this means to you, and to all of us. But don't forget what we've built here. Don't forget what's most important." Musk nodded, a mix of emotions stirring inside him. He had always been driven by the desire to achieve the impossible, but now, standing on the cusp of that achievement, he realized how much he had changed. What mattered now wasn't just the success of the mission, it was the people who had gotten him here, the communities that had supported him, and the lessons he had learned along the way. As he stood on the launch pad one final time, with the massive starship towering above him, Musk felt the weight of the moment. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the facility. It was surreal, as if time itself had slowed down to acknowledge the magnitude of what was about to unfold. The team was in place, ready for the countdown to begin. Engineers, technicians, and astronauts stood at their stations, prepared for whatever was to come. Musk looked out over the crowd of dedicated people who had made this moment possible, and for the first time in a long time, he truly saw them, not just as employees or workers, but as partners in something much larger than themselves. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The final countdown was about to begin. 3, 2, 1. The rocket's engines ignited with a deafening roar, sending shockwaves through the ground. The sheer force of it lifted the starship into the sky, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire world was holding its breath. As the rocket ascended, Musk's mind flashed back to the early days of SpaceX, the countless failures, the doubters, the naysayers. But in that moment, none of that mattered. The rocket was soaring higher and higher, toward a future that had once seemed impossible. Toward Mars. The team erupted in cheers as the starship successfully cleared the atmosphere and continued on its path. The mission had succeeded, against all odds, SpaceX had done it. The world was watching as Musk and his team achieved the impossible. But as the rocket reached its final trajectory, something unexpected happened. The news stations around the world, which had been reporting on the launch, suddenly switched their coverage. A breaking news banner flashed across screens: Elon Musk roasted by court. Judge delivers final verdict on SpaceX's taxation, and the repercussions will blow your mind. The shift in focus was jarring, and Musk, still basking in the glow of SpaceX's success, immediately felt his stomach drop. It had only been a few hours since the launch, and yet the media was already shifting its attention to his legal battle with the government over taxation. Musk had done everything he could to avoid a showdown. He had focused on his work, on SpaceX's innovations, on Mars. But the repercussions of his past decisions were catching up with him, and now, a tough female judge was poised to hand down a decision that would change everything. The media frenzy intensified as reporters clamored for information on the case. Musk watched from the control room as the news feed flashed images of the courtroom, where the judge, a no-nonsense woman known for her no-compromise stance on corporate tax laws, was preparing to deliver her verdict. As the judge took the stand, her voice rang out, "Elon Musk, your actions have affected the lives of millions, but you've also avoided your responsibility to the people you've promised to serve. The time has come for you to face the consequences of your actions. The repercussions will not just affect your companies, but the future of the industry you fought so hard to revolutionize. The camera zoomed in on Musk's face as the weight of the words settled in. This was the moment that would change everything, not just for SpaceX, not just for Tesla, but for Musk himself. The final verdict was imminent. And the world was about to learn the true cost of Musk's ambition. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?